Hello, everybody. Another Zoom at noon here on a Tuesday. Or no, it's a Wednesday, right? That's been like the toughest part, me getting the day right now. So on a Wednesday, and today we have Erica Corbo, our piano and flute and voice and theory and improvisation teacher. Um, Erica's been with Rockdale for shoot 8 years, 7 or 8 years, probably. Yeah. Um, and she's super creative. Her like awesome, like her album, uh, "I America," right?
Yeah.
"I America." Get it? "I America." America is awesome. Really cool, like unique performer and everything. So I'm gonna kick it over to Erica, and she's gonna talk to you a little bit about just basics of improvisation, right? And beginning
Yes.
improv.
Yes.
All right, all you, Air.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am. I'm gonna just give you the introduction to improvisation. So, improvisation 101. So, if you've never improvised before, you're in the right place. I'm here to kind of tell you about what it is and how you can get started. So, first of all, improvising basically means to create and perform without preparation or spontaneously. So it means you're not playing a song that you've already learned, you're just playing whatever comes to you. And you improvise all the time, even if you don't realize it. I mean, you improvise all the time in your life. When you go about your day, you never know what's going to happen. You know, you have to roll with the punches and adjust. You improvise when you're talking to people. Um, you improvise when you're playing sports. You practice your skills, but then when you're in the game, you're improvising. You're reacting to what's happening around you. And improvising in music is really the same. Music and sports are very similar. Um, so just like in sports, we practice our skills. That's why we go to lessons and practice at home. But then when we're playing, we're just supposed to play. Even when we're playing a song that we've learned the notes, a song that's composed, we're kind of supposed to let go of all our practice and just play. It's called play for a reason. So I think that music is a language, and improvisation is kind of the highest form of music because it shows how well you know the language, because you're not reciting someone else's thing that they've written, you're making your own thing up. And improvisation is in most styles of music. You hear it in rock and pop music when, for example, there's a guitar solo. Usually that's improvised. Classical music used to be largely improvised. It's lost that element today. But the great composers were huge improvisers, like Mozart, Beethoven. All of those men probably gave whole concerts that were improvised. All that stuff has gotten codified and written down, and that's kind of got it's kind of evolved out of that for classical music. But jazz is highly improvised, and there's also many styles of music that are only improvised, where there's never pre-composition. So there's lots of styles of improvisation that we could work on. I want to start with just a little bit of free improv. That's a whole nother workshop that I'm going to do just on that. But for today, I thought we would at least start there just to give you a taste.
Cool.
So free improv means that we're not thinking about our instrument or music in a normal way. We're basically trying to approach it like we have never seen it before. And we're just trying to experiment and explore and see what we find out about it, what we can come up with. So I can show you a little, and then I was going to take turns with, I don't know if that's possible right now. I was going to have everyone take turns and try it out on their instruments.
I don't know if we have enough people in to do something like that, but you could, maybe advise how you take your turn and try, try it on your own for the people
Okay, yeah.
who are recording.
So,
I'm happy to try it too.
yeah, so you can try it even without an instrument.
Because free improvisation is not actually something that I do a lot of, even. So, I mean, that's what I've been saying. A lot of these clinics are great because I get to see how all the other teachers teach, and like I'm getting these lessons too that I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I'm gonna put this into my lessons and stuff now too, and my practice too, because I have to practice everything that you guys teach as well. It doesn't just
Yeah,
like just because I'm a musician doesn't mean that I can be like, oh, that's how you do that. Cool, I've got it now. Like, no, it takes everything takes practice. Any new idea is going to take practice.
that's for sure.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so I'll show you what to do, and then you can try it on your own at home. What I start with a lot of times in my lessons with my students is I ask them to make the sound of a thunderstorm using the piano. It's a lot easier on piano than other instruments, but it kind of opens up some things that you can do with piano that you may not have thought of before. So I'll just give you like a little tutorial on that. A thunderstorm, we have rain, we have wind, we have thunder, and we have lightning. So those are all very different things. So rain on piano is kind of intuitive, and it can rain slowly, and it can get faster. You could do this with anything. I mean, you could do it with your voice, like doot, 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 doot. You could do it with any instrument, like on flute. Piano is a very tactile instrument, so it's easier to approach it in a free way, in my opinion. It could be like guitar as well, but okay, so there's rain, there's wind, which I always tell my young students to kind of act out the thing they're trying to play with their hands, and then the piano lends itself so that you can just transfer that right to the keys. So we have wind. If you are using your voice, it could be something like woo, woo. If you're using a guitar, I don't play guitar, but I guess I have one right here.
I remember that guitar.
Yeah. It is not plugged in or anything, but you could, especially if it was electric guitar, you could kind of,
Yeah.
you could bend notes or do this, which makes a really small sound, which I don't know if you can hear or not.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, you can also, blow.
Or take your fingernails against that
Yeah.
the top string,
Exactly.
get something like that. Yeah.
Thunder is really fun. Because you just get loud. So all kids and adults love doing thunder. And then
I was thinking about when you said thunder, I was thinking about like a tube amp, like the reverb in those that you can like kick a tube amp when it's on and it goes like
yeah.
So like I mean that's something Jimi Hendrix used to do is like when he was in being very improvisational is he would use also not just the instrument, the amp. What does that or who's the organ player for John Medeski? Is it Medeski? Yeah. He like what? Yeah. And he would like shake his whole organ because of there's the reverb tank in there, so he would just pick it up and shake the whole organ just to make that reverb tank. There's springs in a reverb, and when you shake them too hard, they hit the edges, and that's when you'd get like a, it's not the sound that it's supposed to make.
Right.
But that I guess that's where you're going with improv is
So
not the conventional sound of the instrument.
Exactly. We want to kind of open our mind or open our thinking to like allow anything to be possible. And the reason the thunderstorm is just a good way to start is because it gives you like 4 distinct sounds.
Right.
So like the thunder, the rain, the wind, and then lightning doesn't make a sound, but it makes a little crack sometimes. But I always tell my students to just imagine how it is. It's like a bright flash. So it could be like one loud note, kind of sharp. On another instrument, it could be like anything, just to imagine kind of
something very staccato, maybe like that.
Yeah.
It could be,
Right. So
because it's so instant. Right.
Right. It's like, it's basically a crack. Sometimes you do hear like a slap from
Yeah.
lightning.
Yeah.
So then what I usually do with my students is I play with them, and like I say, okay, do you want to be the wind or the rain? And you could do this if you are a piano player, you could do this at home with your parent. One of you could be the rain, one of you could be the wind, because that's usually how the storm begins. So maybe I can do both actually. And that kind of develops for a while, and then I'll cue them and I say, okay, now lightning and thunder. And so on and so forth. And then sometimes the storm can ease back down into rain and wind. So in that way, we can also practice making a composition out of improvisation. So that's why the thunderstorm is a really useful and really good place to start. I would also encourage any musician to just play with their instrument and just see what sounds you could make. For example, you can do percussive sounds on a guitar, you can do percussive sounds on a piano, you can do percussive sounds on flute. It's really quiet. I don't know if you can, I don't know if you can hear it, but we have these little tapping sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that on most instruments with keys. Basically, any instrument is going to have its own special things. So what you want to do is really explore and find out all the things you could do. Sometimes
Almost like their mechanical sound, right?
Yes.
Not their sound that they were intended to make, but the like consequences of the sound that like I know with like piano when you record the pedal sound, like
Yeah, there's that.
pedal makes a sound that like you're not really supposed to have, but when you take it out actually of a recording, it makes the piano sound kind of like it puts you there when you hear that pedal sound. You can hear that like there's mechanics that are actually going on.
Right. So part of what improv is also just deep listening. So it's listening to every sound. It's like it's making music out of every sound, like environmental sounds, your breathing sounds, all your mechanical sounds of your instrument. It's also really helpful to experiment with playing with different parts of your body, or putting your instrument backwards. If you're a guitarist, you could put it upside down and play it left-handed, or with my flute, I could take it apart and just play on the top piece.
Cool.
I could even just leave it like this and talk into it or make some weird noises like that. On brass instruments, you can use just the mouthpiece to make a lot of weird. I've done whole group improvisations just with mouthpieces. And on piano, you can do anything you want, basically with any part of your body. I've also played like this before.
That's like Jerry Lee Lewis stuff right there too, right?
Yeah. So I don't want to get too far into that because I want to do that in a whole nother workshop, but I just want to introduce that because it's a really good way to kind of loosen yourself up.
Yeah, it's a cool way to like even come up and approach your instrument, especially maybe if you're bored of practice.
Exactly. Yeah.
Then like do something. Approach your instrument from a completely different idea, and you might, and it will spark your interest again.
Exactly. Yeah. Sometimes, and even when you're improvising all the time, it can get boring because what happens is we get stuck in ruts because we have a certain skill set and we're limited by that. Of course, we're always practicing to expand our skills, but what we improvise is it's going to get repetitive after a while if we improvise a lot. So there's different ways to subvert that. In the improv group I play in, sometimes we all trade instruments. So like I will play saxophone and I don't know at all how to play saxophone. Like I've never played that before. So we might do a whole piece where we're all on instruments that we have no idea how to play.
Right. Well, saxophone and flute, similar fingerings though, right?
Yeah, but like the mouth is like
of course. The embouchure and using
like I could barely I could barely make a sound. And it was also kind of gross because it was my friend's reed and it was all spitty. But
Yeah, yeah. BYOR, right?
Maybe get to bring your own reed. Um,
Probably
okay.
bring your own mouthpiece. I would say you would bring your own.
Well, especially now because of, we don't want to share germs right now. So
Right. So, like, just use your own right now.
just
Don't-
use your own. This was like in the good old
The good,
days.
the
So, um, okay, so I'll get a little more into something that we call, so if free improv, we can sometimes call atonal, which means we don't always have a key or we're
Right.
not playing notes. There is free improv that is tonal, but I'm going to shift back now to tonal improv, and basically I'm going to approach this melodically. So I'm going to kind of teach you how to start improvising with a melody. I could also do a whole nother workshop on improvising rhythmically, although a drum teacher would be much better at that
We
than
actually,
me. Yeah.
Dave actually I think Dave's doing a creative improv for drums on Monday.
Okay, good. So I would, even not non-drummers, I would recommend
Yeah.
seeing that, because really music isn't really about notes. It's really more about rhythm, in my opinion. And notes are important, but like the rhythm is more, I mean, nothing's more important, but if I had to choose one thing that was the
Right.
most important, I think it would be rhythm.
Well, I always say that I started as a drummer, and it's great to start as a drummer because then you can pick up any other instrument because you know half the battle of that instrument already. Is that you know the rhythm. If you have rhythm, most instruments are based around that first, and then you just have to learn how to play the notes. So,
Right.
yeah.
If you're trying to learn something, some difficult passage, I've been having my students clap it first, because once they know the rhythm, like the notes kind of fall into place.
Yeah. I
Um,
always say it before you play it. Make sure
yeah.
you can actually understand how to say it before you take it to the instrument. So, yeah.
Um, okay, so no matter what level you are on your instrument, even if you actually don't know how to play your instrument at all, it's okay, because you can start by just improvising on one note. And again, if I was doing a rhythmic workshop, we would probably start with clapping. But I kind of want to show you today about playing. So I don't play guitar, but I will just randomly pick a note. Okay, so I'm going to just do a little like solo, just using one note. And since we're using Zoom, I'm just going to do this unaccompanied. But it's really fun to do this with a friend or with your parent, or you can just put on any music you like and play along. So if I just choose one note, there's a little solo. If I could do it on piano, and anyone can play piano because all you do is press the key down. So like if you're just around a piano, anyone can do this. I could do that for a lot longer, but I want to show you on a few different instruments. So I do it on my flute. Um, and you could also do it with your voice, of course.
Cool.
So that's a perfect place to start if you've never improvised using notes before and you want to kind of start. I would start there. And again, you can put on any song that you like, and you can just pick a note on your instrument and see if it matches. If it doesn't match, a good thing to do is try to go half a step up or down, and it will probably fit. But even if you really don't know many notes, I bet you could find a song where some of the notes you know match with the song. So after we try it on one note, we want to try it on two notes. So let's just call the note we played first Do. So I think I played F. So now I'm going to add Re. So I'm going to play the note right next to it, which is G. Okay, and I'm going to improvise using just two notes. So adding one more note, I could have played for like a whole half an hour. I mean, I could have kept going. It is helpful if you add a note that's a whole step above the first one, because as I progress through this, we're going to learn a little bit about the pentatonic scale. So if you're on a fretted instrument, again, I have no idea. I would have to think about it to figure out what note I'm actually playing, but I'm just going to pick one. And you can kind of hear whether it's a half step or a whole step. So a half step sounds like this. Oops, sorry, I don't play guitar. And a whole step sounds like this. So we want to try to do it with a whole step. So let's see. I'm going to do it this way. Okay, so basically any, you could talk with your teacher more about learning about half and whole steps if you don't know yet. But any scale you know, the first two notes, do and re, like C and D or B flat and C, are going to be a whole step apart. Right. And if you're on a fretted instrument, you might have to skip a fret in between. Yep. So after we practice with two notes, we can try three notes. And the first three notes we're going to do is do, re, mi. Do, re, mi. The first three notes of a scale. So both whole steps. Okay, so now I'm just going to use F, G, A, since I started on F and then I did F and G. Now I added the next key, which is A. So I'm going to actually accompany myself for this, although you could, like I said, practice it just with single notes or with a track in the background. So let me just give myself a simple accompaniment, and then I'll add the notes. So already with three notes, with three notes, we have many more places we can go. And a lot of times when my students first start to improvise, I get a lot of just this. Because they don't know what to do and they're just playing with their fingers. So that's one of the downfalls of piano, actually. It's easy to just kind of fire away, and then we're not always being creative. But that can
I have the same thing with guitar players. When I teach them the pentatonic scale, they just want to play up and down the scale.
Right.
Rather than mix the scale up and play around with the notes. They're, it's kind of like the alphabet is, you learn it as A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but we don't use it as A, B, C. We don't use the order.
Right, we're not just constantly saying the ABCs.
Yeah. We don't say the ABCs all the time. We mix them up, and that's how we make words, right?
Right, that's a good way to think of it.
Yeah.
So if you're trying at home and you're kind of just using them in order, I would try to do them in a different order, like, the middle one, top one, the bottom. It also can be helpful to give yourself a rhythm. So I'll just give a really simple rhythm that's easy to experiment with at first, and I'm just going to draw it in on this paper. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yeah, so short, short, long, quarter, quarter, half. But even if you don't know what quarter notes and half notes are, you can just short, short, long. So basically, this works better with a song in four. So instead of just playing the same, okay, how can I explain this? Okay, if the notes are all the same length, the improvisation is not interesting. We need some notes that are short, and we need some notes that are long. And eventually we need rests, we need silences. But first we're just gonna start with the short and long notes. So instead of just playing all my notes the same, I'm going to try short, short, long, short, short, long, short, short, long. And I'm just going to keep doing that rhythm because it's a really simple rhythm to start with. It makes it sound really nice. And eventually you'll hear other things that you want to add. So if you just keep using that rhythm, it'll like other rhythms will occur to you. They'll pop in your mind.
Cool.
That's a really good thing because then you'll realize that you do hear other things as well.
That's great.
Yes. Okay, so those were the notes do, re, mi. Now we're gonna kind of try a different group of 3 notes. We're gonna try do, mi, sol. And I'm just gonna switch to actually the key of C in case there's beginner piano players watching because the key of C is easiest for them. It doesn't really matter what key you do because I know on guitar and stuff, maybe C is not the easiest. So do, mi, sol, they're the basic notes of a chord, a triad. So if you're playing on an instrument like flute or any horn or anything, it would be the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale. So if you know the B flat scale on flute, for example, then you want to play the first note, which is B flat, the third note, which is D, and the fifth note, which is F. Okay, it's the same with any major scale. So these notes are called the home notes, or that's what I call them anyway, the home notes of each key. So they're going to sound very correct, very right. They're not going to sound dissonant at all. They're a little harder than just playing do, re, mi because you have to move your fingers more. You have to, have wider jumps on a guitar. On piano, your keys are spaced out, but you'll get a different sound. So I'm going to do a short improv with those 3 notes: C, E, and G, do, mi, sol. Okay.
Nice.
So simple enough. You'll also maybe notice that sometimes I repeat stuff when I'm improvising. That's a whole nother thing. Maybe if I do another workshop on this, I can get more into that. But I'll just say that if you play something that you like, I would try to repeat it
Right.
right then and there. Yeah, at first you're probably not going to remember anything that you played. That's how it usually starts off. You're going to be like, I have no idea what I just played. But if you keep practicing, trying to remember and noticing things you like and then trying to redo them, even if you don't know if you're redoing it correctly, you're going to develop your ear and you're going to be able to remember very long stretches of improv.
Do you do you recommend recording yourself maybe when you improv and listening back maybe to hear some of those ideas? And I know that David Gilmour, guitar player for Pink Floyd, he used to whenever he'd write a guitar solo, he'd usually do it all improvisation and record himself doing it 10, 15, 20 times. Then he'd go back and listen to the parts. And then he'd write his guitar solo based on his own improvisation. So it's a really cool way of kind of looking at a solo. It's composed, but it's composed out of improvisation. So it
Yeah.
still has the feel of improvisation, but it has maybe the structure of a composition. So
Yeah, recording yourself is really good. And some bands compose like as a group that way. They'll improvise together, they'll
Yeah.
jam together, and then see what comes up, and then they'll listen back and
Yeah.
make songs.
Right.
So recording yourself is good, especially at first, just because you have no idea how you sound. So I think it's actually always good to record yourself while you're playing, even if you're not improvising. But yeah, recording your improv can really help. And also just practicing. So like with my improv group, we do an exercise called copy respond. So we all as a group play one movement of about 2 minutes long, improvising. Then we try to replicate it immediately.
Oh, wow.
I mean, we've never gotten it exactly right, but
Yeah,
like
right. But it's a challenge, right?
it's a challenge, and we know we're gonna have to replicate it when we start. So that changes how you play, because you're gonna be like
Right.
more aware of your choices.
Right.
And then after we replicate it, the third movement is supposed to be like a response so it's supposed to be different.
Okay. So
So
it's
that,
improv, copy, response.
right. So there's all different exercises like that that can help you to train yourself to be able to remember what you hear
Very cool.
or what you've played. Because I believe that when you're improvising, you should still be doing it compositionally. So like if I'm gonna, I do whole concerts where I improvise, but it's not random. Like I notice themes that I create, and then I'll bring them back at the end of the piece to make it sound more like a composition. And there are other schools of improv where it's more random. I just don't enjoy that as much. Okay, so getting back to our 3 notes, do, mi, sol, however you want to say it, the 3 notes of the chord, those are the home notes. So music is always about tension and release, or going away from home and coming back to home. That's what makes it satisfying to our ear. If everything was just home notes, it would sound like the most basic lullaby. Even all lullabies even have some outside notes in them. So it would just be boring, basically. Right. So the first group I showed you, do, re, mi, re is actually an outside note. So what we're going to do now is try 4 notes. We're going to add re back in. So we have do, re, mi, sol, which on piano I'm doing C, D, E, G.
1, 2, 3, 5.
Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 5, exactly. So whatever instrument you're playing, whatever scale you know best, 1, 2, 3, 5. So let me do another short improv. I'm just going to keep the same background because it's just simple. And you can hear now how much we add by putting that one little tension note back in. Okay, so having that note in there gives us some a little more flow, because before we had jumps, right? We had thirds.
Right.
And it sounds kind of boxy. So even though it doesn't really sound like a tension note, it is. This note of D in the key of C wants to resolve either to the third or the root. Right. So it's pulling your ear one way or the other. So if I just stop on the D, you'll notice that it sounds a little weird.
Right.
So you hear when I got back to do, it was like, oh, finally she's back. Because if I just stop on re, it sounds like, what's going to happen now? It's like a cliffhanger. Yeah.
And I noticed when you played the first time that you wouldn't hang on the D much. It was more of what we call like a passing tone, right?
Exactly, yeah. These are
going to take you from one tone to the next tone. It wants to resolve. It wants to go somewhere where like it answers the question. That's kind of how I like to describe sometimes seconds and fourths and sixths and sevenths, is like they have a question that wants to be answered, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if I stop on the re on the second, it sounds like I'm asking a question, and then the answer will be when I resolve it.
Right.
So in a lot of modern music, you might choose to leave it unresolved on purpose. But the point is you need to be aware of what effect your choices are having. So doing this exercise will really give you awareness of what that in that specific note, the second, what it adds. So after you play with 1, 2, 3, 5, which on piano is C, D, E, G, we're now going to try a different group of 4. We're going to try 1, 3, 5, 6.
Okay.
So that's C, E, G, A, or if I was in B flat, F, sorry, B flat, D, F, G, you know, whatever key, F, A, C, D. So it's we're always having the notes of the triad, and then we're adding one outside note. So this time we're adding a note above the top note. So this sounds really bluesy. This group of 4 notes is perfect if you're practicing 12-bar blues, actually. It's also good for that kind of classical style. So let me show you a little of both. I'll play the classical way. And I think the 6th has like a more joyful sound because it's like goes over the 5th, so it's kind of like a leap of, I don't know. It seems like you're like leaping above.
Yeah, right. You're expanding. Yeah. You're expanding, and it still is happy too. The 6th, the 2nd sometimes has like more of a.
It's a little melancholy.
Yeah, it's a little bit melancholy, but like the 6th is kind of like hopeful.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's more that I didn't know was out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wow, we can go above the top of the chord.
Yeah, yeah.
So let me just play a little now with like a blues. I'll just do a 12-bar blues just using those 4 notes. I don't teach the blues with the blues scale at first, although that's totally fine. That's how I learned it when I was a kid. I learned the blues scale first, but I actually teach it with these 4 notes first.
Huh, cool.
It doesn't give you the dissonance, but I think it gives you a better understanding of.
Well, it would be like closer to the major pentatonic, right?
It's a little more like a jazzy blues, I guess.
Right.
Than a 12-bar blues, but I think the 12-bar blues and the blues scale is actually more authentically African. The jazzy blues obviously has a lot of classical influence, so maybe that's why. I mean, in Africa they also have major pentatonic scales, but.
Sure.
But I know the blues scale is like kind of a more African sound.
Right.
So let me also point out that even though I'm using just 4 notes, I can move the octave. So for example, I can play C, E, G, A in this order, or I could put the G, A on the bottom and then approach C that way, the 5, 6, 5, 6, 1. And that gives me a whole nother thing. And that sounds really familiar as like a bass line. So I'm just now going to use that. I'm going to play C, E, G, A, and then also the bottom 5 and 6. So.
Yeah, it's got a happy blues sound. Like
like because I didn't show you the minor third yet. So.
Yeah, right. Like it's kind of it almost sounds like the New Orleans kind of blues.
Yeah,
like New Orleans jazz blues, where it's like makes you kind of want to get up and dance along to it. It's not like not a melancholy blues.
Right. It's not right. Exactly. So that's 1, 3, 5, 6. Now. There's one more group of 4, but before we get to that, I want to add those 2 groups together. So this is going to make the major pentatonic scale. We're going to put the re back in. So we have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Okay, it would take me forever to play that on guitar, so I'm not going to, but. So we get that sound, 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Yeah, Jerry can do it, because I would have to like figure it out.
Oh, sorry. right?
What? Wait.
Where are you at?
It doesn't matter what key. Yeah, just do it again. Yeah. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. We basically have a whole scale. We're skipping. There's only 2 notes that we're not including: the 4 and the 7. Because those are the weirdest sounding ones. So these are kind of the most in sounding notes. And we could improvise for, like, a lot of songs just use this scale, especially folk songs like Oh Susanna. I think the middle uses other notes, but the first part just uses that. There's
A
remember
lot,
that? Huh?
like so many melodies of like
Yes.
contemporary music. It's this scale. It's, I mean, like
Yeah.
I've done, where my band has to take all of these vocal, these songs, and then we have to play them as instrumentals. And when you learn them, like as doing coming like kind of like an organ trio vibe, where like you're playing just the melody. And whenever I like pick out a song, I'm like, it's major pentatonic. Every one of them, major pentatonic. The melody of the song is always major pentatonic. So
Usually when it sounds really good,
yeah,
it's because it's that scale. At least
yeah,
I like that sound.
it's gonna sing. It's singable. That's, I think,
Yeah, our ear really can naturally hear it, which is why it's so prevalent. Like,
yeah,
it's not the other way around. It's like we discovered it because it sounds natural.
yeah,
There's many songs, like, remember that song Timber? It's
yeah.
going down. That's major.
I'm willing to.
I think it
Yeah.
uses those notes.
Yeah. Well, and the most popular probably song that just does this major pentatonic is right.
Oh yeah.
That's the way to learn. Like I love
Yeah.
teaching pentatonic. It's just my girl. It's
Yeah, my girl. Yeah.
my girl. Just
Um.
that was actually one of the first melodies I learned, like taught myself. I sat at a piano and figured out my girl, and like
Aw,
that was like the first thing I ever learned when I was like 7 years old at like a
that's
piano.
cute. Yeah. So I wanted to recommend that to everyone. I think the best practice you can do is to just try to sound out songs that you like
Yeah.
and try to just improvise along to them.
Right.
Um, and I just also want to point out that when you're improvising or practicing improvising, it's not about it sounding good. When you're practicing, it's about you exploring.
Hmm.
So like you can't get upset when you hit a note that doesn't sound good to you, because if you don't play those wrong notes, you're not gonna. That's how you learn which notes are good.
Right.
Yeah. So a lot of my students, they do get upset, like especially ones that kind of don't really like improvising. It's because they don't like to feel wrong. But it's not about being right or wrong. It's about like you figuring out
Yeah.
how to use your instrument and figuring out what kind of sounds you like. So I'll just improvise for a second with the pentatonic. Um, so that sounded. I just want to point out that I played 12-bar blues progression.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so you can use that progression. Like, it doesn't have to
Doesn't
sound.
have to have that chunk, a chunk, a
Yeah.
chunk, a chunk to make it be a blues.
Yeah.
That's the rhythm. That's the blues rhythm or like really a shuffle. That's
Yeah, that makes it sound.
think of a shuffle blues is what most people think of, but a blues is really a progression or there's many different blues progressions. Most of them revolve around 1, 4, and 5,
Right.
but we can even embellish and add some more chords in there too.
Right. The regular blues is, I think, 1, 4, 5. I mean, of course, there's variations, but
Yeah.
jazz blues adds other stuff. But the most like authentic blues is just 1, 4, 5, and they're in different orders, and there's many different styles of classic blues also.
And we
Yeah.
could get into, if you're not sure what we're talking about with 145, we could do a whole chord exercise of just showing you how to, because when we say 145 in this case, we're using
Yes.
like Roman numerals 145 to talk about which chord. It's different than the notes that you're talking about in your scale. Although they're all related. It's all interrelated. It's a little bit different. So
Yeah,
that's
that does
another
confuse.
that's another topic.
Yes, that does confuse my students a lot because there's a lot of numbers. And piano, there's finger numbers,
Yeah.
there's numbers of the scale, which I call scale degrees, and there's numbers of chords, which are Roman numerals, like Jared said. So what we've been talking about today with the notes, we're giving numbers to the notes, is degrees of the scale. And if anyone watches this at home and like doesn't understand what I mean by 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, feel free to. I mean, I don't know. I'd be fine with like answering questions by email or something like that. Like if you're home and you don't know 1, 2, 3, 5, 6 on your instrument,
Yeah.
I could just tell you C, D, E, G, A, or whatever notes you know. I could tell you. So I just want to do one more thing. So again, when we do the exercises like this, we're really learning the quality of each note of the scale. So we learned what the 2 or re sounds like. We learned what la or the 6 sounds like. We haven't learned the 4 yet. Okay, the 4 is called fa. If you know do, re, mi, fa, sol, in the key of C, it will be F. And this is kind of the weirdest sounding one of besides from the other note we didn't get to. So it's oh and the saints. That's using 1, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this note, the 4, the F in this case, might not really sound right a lot of the times. And like Jared said, chords are a whole other thing because it's going to depend on what chords are underneath as to whether or not that note sounds right or where you would put it. But for anyone that does understand chords, I'll just tell you I've been using just basic 1 and 5, like C and G, or I've been using 1, 4, 5 chords. So I'm just going to use 1 and 5. I'm going to go back to this. So we have one chord, another chord, and I'm going to use C, E, F, G. So that's if I stay on it. Sounds kind of weird, but it sounds nice when we resolve it. Yeah. So after you learn what the 4 sounds like, and I only showed you, I played for like a minute, but you should play for like a whole day or a couple days just trying 1, 2, 3, 5, and trying 1, 3, 5, 6, because you really want to develop, this is how you're going to develop your own melodic vocabulary.
Right.
You're going to find a lot of phrases using, like for example, 1, 3, 4, 5, we found, oh, when the saints. Okay, you're going to hear things that you've heard in music before, and that you're going to start to understand what you're hearing.
Right.
This like helps on a lot of levels because it helps you train your ear, it helps you figure out what you like, and it helps you figure out the quality of each interval. And improvisation is basically breaking down music to its most basic parts and then making your own thing out of it.
Right.
So after you spend a day doing 1, 2, 3, 5, then you spend another day doing 1, 3, 5, 6, then you spend a day doing 1, 3, 4, 5. The last thing you're going to do is add them all together, and you have a 6-note scale. Of course, you should also play with the pentatonic scale. So if we put all of them together, we have a 6-note scale. But now we're playing less random because we understand what each interval is doing. So like I know that I love doing the six at the top. I love using the two to get back to the one. The four is just whatever. I don't really the four. No, I use the
And but that goes all different because like I love four, like I love the four, like so like but I use a lot of more like minory bluesy kind of stuff.
it would depend
Like
on what you're playing over.
right, like you know, because I think of it more as like that perfect four like sound where it's kind of like the four is the five.
Yes. Yeah.
The four is the five, in depending on how you look at it too. Like it could be, you know, the five above is the four below, right? So I know that's
Yeah.
again
Yeah.
getting a little bit deeper into theory stuff, but like anything, it can flip flop depending on if you're going up or down. Again, well, we could
Right,
get
the
deeper.
intervals always they do flip flop, yeah.
Right,
But if we're in a certain key, we would always call the one thing a four.
right,
Um,
right.
yeah, but it's true they flip flop in terms of just the intervals.
So
So
some people might notice that like we didn't touch the seven at all. Is there a reason why you don't start with the seven now?
so after you do the six notes, the last final step is to add the seven. The
Okay.
reason that we didn't add this, the reason we didn't add it at first is because it's like the weirdest sounding note.
Yeah, right.
So I can just show you a quick one, including the seven.
Okay.
So now we have the whole scale. So if you're playing on piano, now you're basically just playing on all the white keys. So let me do, I guess I'll do that same thing. So that was the seven. This is the seven. It nicely falls down. So
Oh, world.
also you can do that, which is nice. So yes, I would say the final step is to use the seven and use all notes of the major scale.
And you talked about this earlier, but like certain ones of these notes, besides the one, three, and five, they want to go a certain direction. Usually, the seven wants to go back to the root, right? It doesn't need to go that way, but it leads its way back. The six wants to go to five, the four wants to go to three or four, two wants to go to three or one, but seven usually wants to. The reason why seven wants to go up is because six is still unstable, right? So
Yeah.
when seven goes down to six, it's still kind of like, ooh, it's not quite stable yet. So and it's only a half step away. So half steps tend to lead more, lead towards the half step than the whole step, I guess is
Right, the half step pulls your ear strongly in one direction.
right, right,
So yeah, any tension note is going to want to go up or down, and this you need to have awareness of that basically when you're improvising. This is always happening; you're just not aware of it yet. So this exercise will make you aware of it. Yeah, if the seven goes down, it just has to fall farther because it has to get to the fifth.
right,
So basically, those three home notes, the one, the three, and the five, do, mi, sol, all the other notes are going to be pulled to one of those.
right.
And this is a lot of, I know we did kind of get into a lot of theory,
Yeah,
so
sorry.
basic theory.
Me.
No, it's okay. I mean, I did too with the different notes.
Yeah,
I also just want to say again that you don't feel pressured to only improvise that way with my groups of notes. I mean, you can also just do whatever you want.
right.
This is just kind of a way to
This is
train yourself to be able to use melody,
right.
like to express. If you don't ever figure out how to use it to express what you want to express, you won't have the ability. So it's just a way for you to figure that out.
Well, and I think it's really great that because a lot of the time, improv can be also intimidating because wait,
Don't know
there's
what to
no
do.
rules.
Yeah.
When there's no rules, it can be so. It's good to have a system to practice improvisation because
Exactly.
it seems it can be that for me is like I get I'm not a great improviser, so it can be like nerve wracking for me
Yeah,
when
it's too much. Like
I'm
there's too
told
much.
when I'm like when somebody, especially if I'm playing like in a group that I'm not used to playing with, and they say like Jared, take one. Like I can just feel my blood pressure go like, or not blood pressure, but just like, I'm like, oh no, now I
Yeah,
have to go, now I have to go. But that's just because I don't practice it enough that it'd be like if I was in Germany and I don't speak German and somebody said like, hey, spoke to me in German and expected me to respond, like
yeah.
I don't really know how to respond in German, so it's probably going to sound choppy, and so that I think improv as a language is a to bring it back to that point. It's
Yes. So,
and
and
language
each
takes practice, right?
it
So
takes practice, and the best way to practice is like Jared said, to give yourself rules, or what I like to call them is parameters,
yeah,
just because rules aren't that fun.
no, right.
So no parameters. It's like give yourself limits.
Suggestions.
Right. So like it's just limits. So you could
Yeah.
practice. You could do any notes you want, but maybe use that rhythm that we showed you, short, short, long.
Hmm.
Or you could try one where there's no rules at all. Or you could try one where, for example, on guitar or piano, maybe you're only allowed to play one note at a time. Or you could try these groups of melodies, or you can make your own rhythm and try only playing in that rhythm. So basically, any rule you can think of, you can add that to your practice. And maybe I'll do another workshop with more specific parameter games that we could play.
So that was
Um,
great. I think this was very educational for me, and I'm sure everybody else in here who's listening will really enjoy this, and it gives
cool.
you some fun stuff to work on. It will be recorded and uploaded on YouTube and Facebook, so we can get some people who may have missed out on this, they can still get to watch it. So,
Perfect.
well, thanks, Erica. Yeah,
Thank
anything
you.
else? Any closing thoughts you have, or
I would just say listen to as much music as you can, all different styles, and start to notice when you think they're improvising.
right?
Each style of music is going to have its own language or vocabulary of improvisation. Like they're going to be very different. Um, but yeah, you'll start to notice it, and then when you start to notice how musicians you like improvise, that will inspire you. So,
Very good. Well, I think you've inspired a lot of people today.
oh, thanks. Sure,
So thanks for being here.
thanks for watching.
Cool. And we look forward to next week. More free improv.
Yes.
Yeah.
All
All
right.
right. Bye. Thank you. Thanks, everybody.